We have an adage among us that one that has a disc like pattern on the soles of his feet becomes a vagabond. I fear I have my soles inscribed all over with them. And there is not much room for probability either. I have tried my best to discover them by scrutinizing the soles, but all to no purpose. The feet have been dreadfully cracked through the severity of cold, and no discs or anything of the kind could be traced. However, when there is the tradition, I take it for granted that my soles are full of those signs. But the results are quite patent. It was my cherished desire to remain in Paris for some time and study the French language and civilization. I left my old friends and acquaintances and put up with a new friend, a Frenchman of ordinary means who knew no English. And my French, well, it was something quite extraordinary. I had this in mind that the inability to live like a dumb man would naturally force me to talk French, and I would attain fluency in that language in no time. But on the contrary, I am now on a tour through Vienna, Turkey, Greece, Egypt, and Jerusalem. Well, who can stem the course of the inevitable? And this letter I am writing to you from the last remaining capital of Mohammedan supremacy, from Constantinople. I have 3 traveling companions, 2 of them French, and the third an American. The American is Miss MacLeod, whom you know very well. The French male companion is Monsieur Jules Bois, a famous philosopher and literateur of France. And the French lady friend is the world renowned singer, Mademoiselle Cave. Mr. is Monsieur in the French language, and Miss is Mademoiselle, with a Z sound. Mademoiselle Cave is the foremost singer, opera singer, of the present day. Her musical performances are so highly appreciated that she has an annual income of 3 to 4 lakhs of rupees solely from singing. I had previously been acquainted with her. The foremost actress in the West, Madame Sarah Bernhardt, and the foremost singer Cave are both of them of French extraction and both totally ignorant of English, but they visit England and America occasionally and earn millions of dollars by acting and singing. French is the language of the civilized world, the mark of gentility in the West, and everybody knows it. Consequently, these 2 ladies have neither the leisure nor the inclination to learn English. Madame Bernhardt is an aged lady, but when she steps on the stage after dressing, her imitation of the age and sex of the role she plays is perfect. A girl or a boy, whatever part you want her to play, she is an exact representation of that. And that wonderful voice. People here say her voice has the ring of silver strings. Madame Bernhardt has a special regard for India. She tells me again and again that our country is très ancien, très civilisé, very ancient and very civilized. One year she performed a drama touching on India, in which she set up a whole Indian street scene on the stage. Men, women, and children, sadhus and nagas, and everything. An exact picture of India. After the performance, she told me that for about a month she had visited every museum and made herself acquainted with the men and women and their dress, the streets and bathing ghats, and everything relating to India. Madame Bernhardt has a very strong desire to visit India. C'est mon rêve. It is the dream of my life, she says. Again, the Prince of Wales has promised to take her over to a tiger and elephant hunting excursion. But then she said she must spend some 2 lakhs of rupees if she went to India. She is of course in no want of money. La Divine Sarah, the Divine Sarah, is her name. How can she want money? She who never travels but by a special train. That pomp and luxury many a prince of Europe cannot afford to indulge in. One can only secure a seat for her performance by paying double the fees, and that a month in advance. Well, she is not going to suffer want of money, but Sarah Bernhardt is given to spending lavishly. Her travel to India is therefore put off for the present. Mademoiselle Cave will not sing this winter. She will take a rest and is going to temperate climates like Egypt, etc. I am going as her guest. Cave has not devoted herself to music alone. She is sufficiently learned and has a great love for philosophical and religious literature. She was born amidst very poor circumstances. Gradually, through her own genius and undergoing great labor and much hardship, she has now amassed a large fortune and has become the object of adoration of kings and potentates. There are famous lady singers such as Madame Melba, Madame Emma Ames, and others, and very distinguished singers such as Jean de Reszke, Plancon, and the rest. all of whom earn 2 or 3 lakhs of rupees a year. But with Kav's art is coupled a unique genius, extraordinary beauty, youth, genius, and a celestial voice. All these have conspired to raise Kav to the forefront of all singers. But there is no better teacher than pain and poverty, that extreme penury and pain and hardship of childhood, a constant struggle against which has won for Kav this victory, have engendered a remarkable sympathy and a profound seriousness in her life. Again, in the West, there are ample opportunities along with the enterprising spirit, but in our country, there is a sad dearth of opportunities, even if the spirit of enterprise be not absent. The Bengali woman may be keen after acquiring education, but it comes to naught for want of opportunities. And what is there to learn from in the Bengali language? At best, some poor novels and dramas. Then again, learning is confined at present to a foreign tongue or to Sanskrit and is only for the chosen few. In these Western countries, there are innumerable books in the mother tongue. Over and above that, whenever something new comes out in a foreign tongue, it is at once translated and placed before the public. Monsieur Jules Bois is a famous writer. He is particularly an adept in the discovery of historical truths in the different religions and superstitions. He has written a famous book putting into historical form the devil worship, sorcery, necromancy, incantation, and such other rites that were in vogue in medieval Europe, and the traces of those that obtain to this day. He is a good poet and is an advocate of the Indian Vedantic ideas that have crept into the great French poets such as Victor Hugo and Lamartine and others, and the great German poets such as Goethe, Schiller, and the rest. The influence of Vedanta on European poetry and philosophy is very great. Every good poet is a Vedantin, I find, and whoever writes some philosophical treatise has to draw upon Vedanta in some shape or other. Only some of them do not care to admit this indebtedness and want to establish their complete originality, as Herbert Spencer and others, for instance, but the majority do openly acknowledge. And how can they help it? In these days of telegraphs and railways and newspapers, M. Jules Bois is very modest and gentle, and though a man of ordinary means, he very cordially received me as a guest into his house in Paris. Now he is accompanying us for travel. We have 2 other companions on the journey as far as Constantinople, Père Hyacinthe and his wife. Père, that is Father Hyacinthe, was a monk of a strict ascetic section of the Roman Catholic Church. His scholarship, extraordinary eloquence, and great austerities won for him a high reputation in France and in the whole Catholic order. The great poet Victor Hugo used to praise the French style of 2 men. One of these was Père Hyacinthe. At 40 years of age, Père Hyacinthe fell in love with an American woman and eventually married her. This created a great sensation, and of course the Catholic order immediately gave him up. Discarding his ascetic garb of bare feet and loose-fitting cloak, Père Hyacinthe took up the hat, coat, and boots of the householder and became Monsieur Loyson. I, however, call him by his former name. It is an old, old tale, and the matter was the talk of the whole continent. The Protestants received him with honor, but the Catholics began to hate him. The Pope, in consideration of his attainments, was unwilling to part with him and asked him to remain a Greek Catholic priest and not abandon the Roman Church. The priests of the Greek Catholic section are allowed to marry but once, but do not get any high position. Mrs. Loyson, however, forcibly dragged him out of the Pope's fold. In course of time, they had children and grandchildren. Now the very aged Loyson is going to Jerusalem to try to establish cordial relations among the Christians and Mussulmans. His wife had perhaps seen many visions that Loyson might possibly turn out to be a second Martin Luther and overthrow the Pope's throne into the Mediterranean. But nothing of the kind took place, and the only result was, as the French say, that he was placed between 2 stools. But Madame Loyson still cherishes her curious daydreams. Old Loyson is very affable in speech, modest, and of a distinctly devotional turn of mind. Whenever he meets me, he holds pretty long talks about various religions and creeds. But being of a devotional temperament, he is a little afraid of the Advaita. Madame Loyson's attitude towards me is, I fear, rather unfavorable. When I discuss with the old man such topics as renunciation and monasticism, etc., all those long-cherished sentiments wake up in his aged breast, and his wife most probably smarts all the while. Besides, all French people of both sexes lay the whole blame on the wife. They say that woman has spoiled one of our great ascetic monks. Madame Loisel is really in a sorry predicament, especially as they live in Paris, in a Catholic country. They hate the very sight of a married priest. No Catholic would ever tolerate the preaching of religion by a man with family. And Madame Loisel has a bit of animus also. Once she expressed her dislike of an actress, saying, "It is very bad of you to live with Mr. So and so without marrying him." The actress immediately retorted, "I am 1,000 times better than you. I live with a common man. It may be I have not legally married him, whereas you are a great sinner. You have made such a great monk break his religious vows. If you were so desperately in love with the monk, why, you might as well live as his attending maid. But why did you bring ruin on him by marrying him and thus converting him into a householder?" However, I hear all and keep silent. But old Pierre Hyacinthe is a really sweet-natured and peaceful man. He is happy with his wife and family, and what can the whole French people have to say against this? I think everything would be settled if but his wife climbed down a bit. But one thing I notice, which is that men and women in every country have different ways of understanding and judging things. Men have one angle of vision, women another. Men argue from one standpoint, women from another. Men extenuate women and lay the blame on men, while women exonerate men and heap all the blame on women. One special benefit I get from the company of these ladies and gentlemen is that, except the one American lady, no one knows English. Talking in English is wholly eschewed, and consequently, somehow or other, I have to talk as well as hear French. From Paris, our friend Maxim has supplied me with letters of introduction to various places, so that the countries may be properly seen. Maxim is the inventor of the famous Maxim gun, the gun that sends off a continuous round of balls and is loaded and discharged automatically without intermission. Maxim is by birth an American. Now he has settled in England, where he has his gun factories, etc. Maxim is vexed if anybody alludes too frequently to his guns in his presence and says, "My friend, have I done nothing else except invent that engine of destruction?" Maxim is an admirer of China and India and is a good writer on religion and philosophy, etc. Having read my works long since, he holds me in great, I should say excessive, admiration. He supplies guns to all kings and rulers and is well known in every country, though his particular friend is Li Hengchang. His special regard is for China and his devotion for Confucianism. He is in the habit of writing occasionally in the newspapers under Chinese pseudonyms against the Christians about what takes them to China, their real motive, and so forth. He cannot at all bear the Christian missionaries preaching their religion in China. His wife also is just like her husband in her regard for China and hatred of Christianity. Maxim has no issue. He is an old man and immensely rich. The tour program was as follows: from Paris to Vienna and thence to Constantinople by rail, then by steamer to Athens and Greece, then across the Mediterranean to Egypt, then Asia Minor, Jerusalem, and so on. The Oriental Express runs daily from Paris to Constantinople and is provided with sleeping, sitting, and dining accommodations after the American model. Though not perfect like the American cars, they are fairly well furnished. I am to leave Paris by that train on October 24, 1900. Today is the 23rd October. Tomorrow evening I am to take leave of Paris. This year Paris is a center of the civilized world, for it is the year of the Paris exhibition, and there has been an assemblage of eminent men and women from all quarters of the globe. The masterminds of all countries have met today in Paris to spread the glory of their respective countries by means of their genius. The fortunate man whose name the bells of this great center will ring today will at the same time crown his country also with glory before the world. And where art thou, my motherland? Bengal, in the great capital city swarming with German, French, English, Italian, and other scholars? Who is there to utter thy name? Who is there to proclaim thy existence? From among that wide galaxy of geniuses, there stepped forth one distinguished youthful hero to proclaim the name of our motherland, Bengal. It was the world-renowned scientist, Dr. J.C. Bose. Alone, the youthful Bengali physicist, with galvanic quickness, charmed the Western audience today with his splendid genius. that electric charge infused pulsations of new life into the half dead body of the motherland. At the top of all physicists today is Jagdish Chandra Bose, an Indian, a Bengali. Well done, hero. Whichever countries Dr. Bose and his accomplished, ideal wife may visit, everywhere they glorify India, add fresh laurels to the crown of Bengal. Blessed pair. And the daily reunion of numbers of distinguished men and women which Mr. Leggett brought about at an enormous expense in his Parisian mansion by inviting them to at-homes, that too ends today. All types of distinguished personages, poets, philosophers, scientists, moralists, politicians, singers, professors, painters, artists, sculptors, musicians, and so on, of both sexes, used to be assembled in Mr. Leggett's residence, attracted by his hospitality and kindness. That incessant outflow of words, clear and limpid like a mountain fall, that expression of sentiments emanating from all sides like sparks of fire, bewitching music, the magic current of thoughts from masterminds coming into conflict with one another, which used to hold all spellbound, making them forgetful of time and place, these too shall end. Everything on earth has an end. Once again, I took a round over the Paris exhibition today. This accumulated mass of dazzling ideas, like lightning held steady as it were, this unique assemblage of celestial panorama on earth. It has been raining in Paris for the last 2 or 3 days. During all this time, the sun, who is ever kind to France, has held back his accustomed grace. Perhaps his face has been darkened over with clouds in disgust to witness the secretly flowing current of sensuality behind this assemblage of arts and artists, learning and learned folk. Or perhaps he has hid his face under a pall of cloud in grief over the impending destruction of this elusive heaven of particolored wood and canvas. We too shall be happy to escape. The breaking up of the exhibition is a big affair. The streets of this heaven on earth, the Eden-like Paris, will be filled with knee-deep mud and mortar. With the exception of 1 or 2 main buildings, all the houses and their parts are but a display of wood and rags and whitewashing, just as the whole world is. And when they are demolished, the lime dust flies about and is suffocating. Rags and sand, etc., make the streets exceedingly dirty, and if it rains in addition, it is an awful mess. In the evening of October 24, the train left Paris. The night was dark, and nothing could be seen. Monsieur Bois and myself occupied one compartment, and early went to bed. On awakening from sleep, we found we had crossed the French frontier and entered German territory. I had already seen Germany thoroughly, but Germany, after France, produces quite a jarring effect. On the one hand, the moon is setting. The world-encompassing France is slowly consuming herself in the fire of contemplated retribution, while on the other hand, centralized, young, and mighty Germany has begun her upward march above the horizon with rapid strides. On one side is the artistic workmanship of the dark-haired, comparatively short-statured, luxurious, highly civilized French people, to whom art means life, and on the other, the clumsy daubing, the unskillful manipulation of tawny-haired, tall, gigantic German. After Paris, there is no other city in the Western world. Everywhere it is an imitation of Paris, or at least an attempt at it. But in France, that art is full of grace and ethereal beauty, while in Germany, England, and America, the imitation is coarse and clumsy. Even the application of force on the part of the French is beautiful, as it were, whereas the attempt of the Germans to display beauty even is terrible. The countenance of French genius, even when frowning in anger, is beautiful. That of German genius, even when beaming with smiles, appears frightful, as it were. French civilization is full of nerve, like camphor or musk. It volatilizes and pervades the room in a moment, while German civilization is full of muscle, heavy like lead or mercury. It remains motionless and inert wherever it lies. The German muscle can go on striking small blows untiringly, till death. The French have tender, feminine bodies, but when they do concentrate and strike, it is a sledgehammer blow and is irresistible. The Germans are constructing after the French fashion big houses and mansions, and placing big statues, equestrian figures, etc. on top of them. But on seeing a double-storied German building, one is tempted to ask, is it a dwelling house for men or a stable for elephants and camels? while one mistakes a five-storied French stable for elephants and horses as a habitation for fairies. America is inspired by German ideals. Hundreds of thousands Germans are in every town. The language is, of course, English, but nevertheless, America is being slowly Germanized. Germany is fast multiplying her population and is exceptionally hardy. Today, Germany is the dictator to all Europe. Her place is above all. Long before all other nations, Germany has given man and woman compulsory education, making illiteracy punishable by law, and today she is enjoying the fruits of that tree. The German army is the foremost in reputation, and Germany has vowed to become foremost in her navy also. German manufacture of commodities has beaten even England. German merchandise and the Germans themselves are slowly obtaining a monopoly even in the English colonies. At the behest of the German emperor, all the nations have ungrudgingly submitted to the lead of the German generalissimo in the battlefields of China. The whole day the train rushed through Germany, till in the afternoon it reached the frontiers of Austria, the ancient sphere of German supremacy, but now an alien territory. There are certain troubles in traveling through Europe. In every country, enormous duties are levied upon certain things, or some articles of merchandise are the monopoly of the government, as for instance tobacco. Again, in Russia and Turkey, you are totally forbidden to enter without a royal passport. A passport you must always have. Besides, in Russia and Turkey, all your books and papers will be seized, and when on perusal the authorities are satisfied that there is nothing in them against the Russian or Turkish government and religion, then only they will be returned. Otherwise, they will all be confiscated. In other countries, your tobacco is a source of great trouble. You must open your chest and trunk and packages for inspection whether they contain tobacco, etc. or not. And to come to Constantinople, one has to pass through two big states, Germany and Austria, and many petty ones. The latter had formerly been districts of Turkey, but later on the independent Christian kings made a common cause and wrested as many of these Christian districts from Mohammedan hands as they could. The bite of these tiny ants is much worse than even that of the bigger ones. In the evening of October 25, the train reached Vienna, the capital of Austria. The members of the royal family in Austria and Russia are styled archdukes and archduchesses. Two archdukes are to get down at Vienna by this train, and until they have done so, the other passengers are not allowed to get down. So we had to wait. A few officers in laced uniform and some soldiers with feathered caps were waiting for the archdukes, who got down surrounded by them. We too felt relieved and made haste to get down and have our luggage passed. There were few passengers, and it did not take us much time to show our luggage and have it passed. A hotel had already been arranged for, and a man from the hotel was waiting for us with a carriage. We reached the hotel duly. It was out of the question to go out for sightseeing during the night, so the next morning we started to see the town. In all hotels, and almost in all the countries of Europe except England and Germany, the French fashion prevails. They eat twice a day like the Hindus, in the morning by 12 o'clock and in the evening by 8. Early in the morning, that is about 8 or 9, they take a little coffee. Tea is very little in vogue except in England and Russia. The morning meal is called in French déjeuner, that is breakfast, and the evening meal dinner, that is dinner. Tea is very much in use in Russia. It is too cold, and China is near enough. Chinese tea is excellent, and most of it goes to Russia. The Russian mode of drinking tea is also analogous to the Chinese, that is, without mixing milk. Tea or coffee becomes injurious like poison if you mix milk with it. The real tea drinking races, the Chinese, Japanese, Russians, and the inhabitants of Central Asia, take tea without milk. Similarly, the original coffee drinking races, such as the Turks, drink coffee without milk. Only in Russia they put a slice of lemon and a lump of sugar into the tea. The poor people place a lump of sugar in the mouth and drink tea over it, and when one has finished drinking, one passes that lump on to another, who repeats the process. Vienna is a small city after the model of Paris, but the Austrians are German by race. The Austrian emperor was hitherto the emperor of almost the whole of Germany. In the present times, owing to the far-sightedness of King Wilhelm of Prussia, the wonderful diplomacy of his able minister Bismarck, and the military genius of General von Moltke, the King of Prussia is the emperor of the whole of Germany barring Austria. Austria, shorn of her glory and robbed of her power, is somehow maintaining her ancient name and prestige. The Austrian royal line, the Habsburg dynasty, is the oldest and most aristocratic dynasty in Europe. It was this Austrian dynasty which hitherto rules Germany as emperors. Germany, whose princes are seated on the thrones of almost all the countries of Europe, and whose petty feudatory chiefs even occupy the thrones of such powerful empires as England and Russia. The desire for that honor and prestige Austria still cherishes in full, only she lacks the power. Turkey is called the sick man of Europe. Then Austria should be called the sick dame. Austria belongs to the Catholic sect, and until recently the Austrian Empire used to be called the Holy Roman Empire. Modern Germany has a preponderance of Protestants. The Austrian Emperor has always been the right-hand man of the Pope, his faithful follower, and the leader of the Roman Catholic sect. Now the Austrian Emperor is the only Catholic ruler in Europe. France, the eldest daughter of the Catholic Church, is now a republic, while Spain and Portugal are downfallen. Italy has given only room enough for the papal throne to be established, robbing the Pope's entire splendor and dominion. Between the King of Italy and the Pope of Rome, there is no love lost. They cannot bear each other's sight. Rome, the capital of the Pope, is now the capital of Italy. The king lives in the Pope's ancient palace, which he has seized, and the ancient Italian kingdom of the Pope is now confined within the precincts of the Vatican. But the Pope has still great influence in religious matters, and the chief supporter of this is Austria. As a result of the struggle against Austria, against the age-old thraldom of Austria, the ally of the Pope, uprose modern Italy. Consequently, Austria is against Italy, against because she lost her. Unfortunately, however, young Italy, under England's misdirection, set herself to create a powerful army and navy. But where was the money? So, involved in debt, Italy is on the way to ruin, and to her misfortune, she brought on herself a fresh trouble by proceeding to extend her empire in Africa. Defeated by the Abyssinian monarch, she has sunk down, bereft of glory and prestige. Prussia, in the meantime, defeated Austria in a great war and thrust her off to a great distance. Austria is slowly dying, while Italy has similarly fettered herself by the misuse of her new life. The Austrian royal line is still the proudest of all European royal families. It boasts of being a very ancient and very aristocratic dynasty. The marriages and other connections of this line are contracted with the greatest circumspection, and no such relationship can be established with families that are not Roman Catholic. It was the glamour of a connection with this line that led to the fall of Napoleon the Great. Quaintly enough, he took it into his head to marry a daughter of some noble royal family and found a great dynasty through a succession of descendants. The hero, who questioned as to his pedigree, has replied, "I owe the title to my nobility to none. I am to be the founder of a great dynasty." That is to say, that he would originate a powerful dynasty, and that he was not born to glorify himself with the borrowed plumes of some ancestor. That hero fell into this abyss of family prestige. The divorce of the Empress Josephine, the defeat of the Austrian emperor in battle and taking his daughter to wife, the marriage of Bonaparte in great pomp with Marie Louise, the Princess of Austria, the birth of a son, the installation of the newborn babe as the King of Rome, the fall of Napoleon, the enmity of his father-in-law, Leipzig, Waterloo, St. Helena, Empress Marie Louise, living in her father's house with her child, the marriage of Napoleon's royal consort with an ordinary soldier, the death of his only son, the King of Rome, in the house of his maternal grandfather. All these are well-known incidents of history. Fallen in a comparatively weakened condition, France is now ruminating on her past glory. Nowadays, there are very many books on Napoleon. Dramatists like Sardou are writing many dramas on Napoleon dead and gone, and actresses like Madame Bernhardt and Regine are performing those plays every night before bumper houses. Recently, Madame Bernhardt has created a great attraction in Paris by playing a drama entitled L'Aiglon, the Young Eagle. The young eagle is the only son of Napoleon, practically interned in his maternal grandfather's residence, the Palace of Vienna. The Austrian emperor's minister, the Machiavellian Metternich, is always careful not to allow the tales of heroism of his father to enter into the boy's mind. But a few of Bonaparte's veterans contrived to get themselves admitted into the boy's service in the Schönbrunn Palace incognito, Their idea was to somehow take the boy over to France and found the Bonaparte line by driving out the Bourbons, reinstated by the combined European potentates. The child was the son of a great hero, and very soon that latent heroism woke up in him to hear the glorious tales of battle of his father. One day the boy fled from the Schönbrunn palace accompanied by the conspirators, but Metternich's keen intellect had already scented the matter, and he cut off the journey. The son of Bonaparte was carried back to the Schönbrunn palace, and the young eagle, with his wings tied, as it were, very soon died of a broken heart. This Schönbrunn palace is an ordinary palace. Of course, the rooms, etc., are lavishly decorated. In one of them, perhaps, one meets with only Chinese workmanship. In another, only works of Hindu art. In a third, the productions of some other country, and so on. And the garden attached to the palace is very charming indeed. But all the people that now go to visit this palace go there with the object of seeing the room where Bonaparte's son used to lie, or his study, or the room in which he died, and so forth. Many thoughtless French men and women are interrogating the guard, which room belonged to L'Aiglon, which bed did L'Aiglon used to occupy, and so on. What silly questions these! The Austrians only know that he was the son of Bonaparte, and the relation was established by forcibly taking their girl in marriage. That hatred they have not yet forgotten. The prince was a grandchild of the emperor and homeless, so they could not help giving him a shelter, but they could give him no such title as King of Rome. Only being the grandson of the Austrian emperor, he was an archduke. That was all. It may be that you French people have now written a book on him, making him the young eagle, and the addition of imaginary settings and the genius of Madame Bernhardt have created a great interest in the story. But how should an Austrian guard know that name? Besides, it has been written in that book that the Austrian emperor, following the advice of his minister Metternich, in a way killed Napoleon's son. Hearing the name L'Aiglon, the guard put on a long face and went on showing the rooms and other things, thoroughly disgusted at heart. What else could he do? It was too much for him to give up the tips. Moreover, in countries like Austria, etc., the military department is too poorly paid. They have to live almost on a bare pittance. Of course, they are allowed to go back home after a few years' service. The guard's countenance darkened as an expression of his patriotism, but the hand instinctively moved towards the tip. The French visitors put some silver pieces into the guard's hand and returned home talking of L'Aiglon and abusing Metternich, while the guard shut the doors with a long salute. In his heart, he must have given sweet names to the ancestors of the whole French people. The thing most worth seeing in Vienna is the museum, especially the scientific museum, an institution of great benefit to the student. There is a fine collection of the skeletons of various species of ancient extinct animals. In the art gallery, paintings by Dutch artists form the major portion. In the Dutch school, there is very little attempt at suggestiveness. This school is famous for its exact copy of natural objects and creatures. One artist has spent years over the drawing of a basket full of fish, or a lump of flesh, or a tumbler of water, and that fish, or flesh, or water in the tumbler is wonderful. But the female figures of the Dutch school look just like athletes. There is, of course, German scholarship and German intellectuality in Vienna, but the causes which help the gradual decay of Turkey are at work here also. That is to say, the mixture of various races and languages. The population of Austria proper speaks German. The people of Hungary belong to the Tatar stock and have a different language, while there are some who are Greek-speaking and are Christians belonging to the Greek Church. Austria has not the power to fuse together so many different sects. Hence, she has fallen. In the present times, a huge wave of nationalism is sweeping over Europe, where people speaking the same tongue, professing the same religion, and belonging to the same race want to unite together. Wherever such union is being effectively accomplished, there is great power being manifested. And where this is impossible, death is inevitable. After the death of the present Austrian emperor, Germany will surely try to absorb the German-speaking portion of the Austrian Empire, and Russia and others are sure to oppose her. So there is the possibility of a dreadful war. The present emperor being very old, that catastrophe may take place very early. The German emperor is nowadays an ally of the Sultan of Turkey, and when Germany will attempt to seize Austrian territory, Turkey, which is Russia's enemy, will certainly offer some resistance to Russia. So the German emperor is very friendly towards Turkey. 3 days in Vienna were sufficient to tire me. 3 days in Vienna were sufficient to tire me. To visit Europe after Paris is like tasting an inferior preparation after a sumptuous feast. That dress and style of eating, that same fashion everywhere. Throughout the land, you meet with that same black suit and the same queer hat. Disgusting. Besides, you have clouds above, and this swarm of people with black hats and black coats below. One feels suffocated, as it were. All Europe is gradually taking up that same style of dress and that same mode of living. It is a law of nature that such are the symptoms of death. By hundreds of years of drill, our ancestors have so fashioned us that we all clean our teeth, wash our face, eat our meals, and do everything in the same way. And the result is that we have gradually become mere automata. The life has gone out, and we are moving about, simply like so many machines. Machines never say yeah or nay, never trouble their heads about anything. They move on in the way their forefathers have gone, and then rot and die. The Europeans too will share the same fate. The course of time is ever changing. If all people take to the same dress, same food, same manner of talking, and same everything, gradually they will become like so many machines, will gradually tread the path their forefathers have trod, and as an inevitable consequence of that, they will rot and die. On the 28th October at 9 p.m., we again took that Orient Express train, which reached Constantinople on the 30th. These 2 nights and 1 day the train ran through Hungary, Serbia, and Bulgaria. The people of Hungary are subjects of the Austrian Emperor, whose title, however, is Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary. The Hungarians and Turks are of the same race, akin to the Tibetans. The Hungarians entered Europe along the north of the Caspian Sea, while the Turks slowly occupied Europe through the western borders of Persia and through Asia Minor. The people of Hungary are Christians and the Turks are Mohammedans, but the martial spirit characteristic of Tatar blood is noticeable in both. The Hungarians have fought again and again for separation from Austria and are now but nominally united. The Austrian Emperor is King of Hungary in name only. Their capital, Budapest, is a very neat and beautiful city. The Hungarians are a pleasure-loving race and fond of music, and you will find Hungarian bands all over Paris. Serbia, Bulgaria, and the rest were districts of Turkey and have become practically independent after the Russo-Turkish War, but the Sultan of Turkey is yet their emperor, and Serbia and Bulgaria have no right regarding foreign affairs. There are 3 civilized nations in Europe, the French, the Germans, and the English. The rest are almost as badly off as we are, and the majority of them are so uncivilized that you can find no race in Asia so degraded. Throughout Serbia and Bulgaria, you find the same mud houses, and people dressed in tattered rags, and heaps of filth, and I was almost inclined to think I was back to India. Again, as they are Christians, they must have a number of hogs, and a single hog will make a place more dirty than 200 barbarous men will be able to do. Living in a mud house with mud roof, with tattered rags on his person and surrounded by hogs, there you have your Serb or Bulgarian. After much bloodshed and many wars, they have thrown off the yoke of Turkey, but along with this, they have got a serious disadvantage. They must construct their army after the European model, otherwise the existence of not one of them is safe for a day. Of course, sooner or later they will all one day be absorbed by Russia, but even this 2 days' existence is impossible without an army. So they must have conscription. In an evil hour did France suffer defeat from Germany. Through anger and fear, she made every citizen a soldier. Every man must serve for time sometime in the army and learn the military science. There is no exemption for anybody. He must have to live in the barracks for 3 years and learn to fight, shouldering his gun, be he a millionaire by birth. The government will provide for his food and clothing, and the salary will be a centime, 1 pice a day. After this, he must be always ready for active service for 2 years at his home, and another 15 years he must be ready to present himself for service at the first call. Germany set a lion to fury, so she too had to be ready. In other countries also, conscription has been introduced in mutual dread of one another. So throughout Europe, excepting only England. England, being an island, is continually strengthening her navy, but who knows if the lessons of the Boer War will not force her to introduce conscription? Russia has the largest population of all, so she can amass the biggest army in Europe. Now, the titular states like Serbia and Bulgaria, which the European powers are creating by dismembering Turkey, they too, as soon as they are born, must have up to date trained and well equipped armies and guns, etc. But ultimately, who is to supply the funds? Consequently, the peasants have had to put on tattered rags, while in the towns you will find soldiers dressed in gorgeous uniforms. Throughout Europe, there is a craze for soldiers everywhere. Still, liberty is one thing and slavery another. Even best work loses its charm if one is forced to do it by another. Without the idea of personal responsibility, no one can achieve anything great. Freedom with but one meal a day and tattered rags on is a million times better than slavery in gold chains. A slave suffers the miseries of hell both here and hereafter. The people of Europe joke about the Serbs and Bulgarians, etc., and taunt them with their mistakes and shortcomings. But can they attain proficiency all in a day after so many years of servitude? Mistakes they are bound to commit, aye, by the hundreds. But they will learn through these mistakes and set them right when they have learned. Give him responsibility, and the weakest man will become strong, and the ignorant man sagacious. The train is traversing Hungary, Romania, and other countries. Among the races that inhabit the moribund Austrian Empire, the Hungarians yet possess vitality. All the races of Europe, except one or two small ones, belong to the great stock which European scholars term the Indo-European or Aryan race. The Hungarians are among the few races which do not speak a Sanskritic language. The Hungarians and Turks, as already stated, belong to the same race. In comparatively modern times, this very powerful race established their sovereignty in Asia and Europe. The country now called Turkestan, lying to the north of the western Himalayas and the Hindu Kush range, was the original home of the Turks. The Turkish name for that country is Chagvoy. The Mughal dynasty of Delhi, the present Persian royal line, the dynasty of the Turkish Sultan of Constantinople, and the Hungarians have all gradually extended their dominion from that country, beginning with India and pushing right up to Europe. And even today, these dynasties style themselves as Chakvois and speak a common language. Of course, these Turks were uncivilized ages ago and used to roam with herds of sheep, horses, and cattle, taking their wives and children and every earthly possession with them, and encamp for some time wherever they could find enough pasture for their beasts. And when grass and water ran short there, they used to remove somewhere else. Even now, many families of this race lead nomadic lives in this way in Central Asia. They have got a perfect similarity with the races of Central Asia as regards language, but some difference in point of physiognomy. The Turk's face resembles that of the Mongolian in the shape of the head and in the prominence of the cheekbone, but the Turk's nose is not flat, but rather long, and the eyes are straight and large, though the space between the eyes is comparatively wide, as with the Mongolians. It appears that from a long time past Aryan and Semitic blood has found its way into this Turkish race. From time immemorial, the Turks have been exceedingly fond of war, and the mixture with them of Sanskrit-speaking races and the people of Kandahar and Persia has produced the war-loving races such as the Afghans, Khiljis, Hazaras, Barakhais, Usufjais, etc., to whom war is a passion and who have frequently oppressed India. In very ancient times, this Turkish race repeatedly conquered the western provinces of India and founded extensive kingdoms. They were Buddhists, or would turn Buddhists after occupying Indian territory. In the ancient history of Kashmir, there is mention of these famous Turkish emperors, Hushka, Yushka, and Kanishka. It was this Kanishka who founded the northern school of Buddhism called the Mahayana. Long after, the majority of them took to Mohammedanism and completely devastated the chief Buddhistic seats of Central Asia, such as Kandahar and Kabul. Before their conversion to Mohammedanism, they used to imbibe the learning and culture of the countries they conquered, and by assimilating the culture of other countries would try to propagate civilization. But ever since they became Mohammedans, they have only the instinct for war left in them. They have not got the least vestige of learning and culture. On the contrary, the countries that come under their sway gradually have their civilization extinguished. In many places of modern Afghanistan and Kandahar, etc., there yet exist wonderful stupas, monasteries, temples, and gigantic statues built by their Buddhistic ancestors. As a result of Turkish admixture and their conversion to Mohammedanism, those temples, etc., are almost in ruins, and the present Afghans and allied races have grown so uncivilized and illiterate that far from imitating those ancient works of architecture, they believe them to be the creation of supernatural spirits like the jinn, etc., and are firmly convinced that such great undertakings are beyond the power of man to accomplish. The principal cause of the present degradation of Persia is that the royal line belongs to the powerful, uncivilized Turkish stock, whereas the subjects are the descendants of the highly civilized ancient Persians who were Aryans. In this way, the empire of Constantinople, the last political arena of the Greeks and Romans, the descendants of civilized Aryans, has been ruined under the blasting feet of powerful, barbarous Turkey. The Mughal emperors of India were the only exceptions to this rule. Perhaps that was due to an admixture of Hindu ideas and Hindu blood. In the chronicles of Rajput bards and minstrels, all the Mohammedan dynasties who conquered India are styled as Turks. This is a very correct appellation for, or whatever races the conquering Mohammedan armies might be made up, the leadership was always vested in the Turks alone. What is called the Mohammedan invasion, conquest, or colonization of India means only this, that under the leadership of Mohammedan Turks who were renegades from Buddhism, those sections of the Hindu race who continued in the faith of their ancestors were repeatedly conquered by the other section of that very race who also were renegades from Buddhism or the Vedic religion and served under the Turks, having been forcibly converted to Mohammedanism by their superior strength. Of course, the language of the Turks has, like their physiognomy, been considerably mixed up. Especially those sections that have gone farthest from their native place Chakvoy have got the most hybrid form of language. This year, the Shah of Persia visited the Paris exhibition and returned to his country by rail via Constantinople. Despite the immense difference in time and place, the Sultan and the Shah talked with each other in their ancient Turkish mother tongue. But the Sultan's Turkish was mixed up with Persian, Arabic, and a few Greek words, while that of the Shah was comparatively pure. In ancient times, these Chakvoy Turks were divided into two sections. One was called the White Sheep and the other Black Sheep. But these sections started from their birthplace on the north of Kashmir, tending their flocks of sheep and ravaging countries till they reached the shore of the Caspian Sea. The White Sheep penetrated into Europe along the north of the Caspian Sea and founded the Kingdom of Hungary, seizing a fragment of the Roman Empire, then almost in ruins, while the Black Sheep, advancing along the south of the Caspian Sea, gradually occupied the western portion of Persia and, crossing the Caucasus, by degrees made themselves masters of Arabian territory, such as Asia Minor and so forth. Gradually they seized the throne of the Caliph and bit by bit annexed the small remnant of the Western Roman Empire. In very remote ages, these Turks were great snake worshippers. Most probably it was these dynasties whom the ancient Hindus used to designate as Nagas and Takshakas. Later on they became Buddhists, and afterwards they very often used to embrace the religion of any particular country they might conquer at any particular time. In comparatively recent times, of the two sections we are speaking about, the White Sheep conquered the Christians and became converts to Christianity, while the Black Sheep conquered the Mohammedans and adopted their religion. But in their Christianity or Mohammedanism, one may even now trace on research the strata of serpent worship and of Buddhism. The Hungarians, though Turks by race and language, are Christians, Roman Catholics in religion. In the past, religious fanaticism had no respect for any tie, neither the tie of language, nor that of blood, nor that of country. The Hungarians are ever the deadly enemies of Turkey, and but for the Hungarians' aid, Christian states such as Austria, etc., would not have been able to maintain their existence on many an occasion. In modern times, owing to the spread of education and the discovery of linguistics and ethnology, people are being more attracted to the kinship of language and blood, while religious solidarity is gradually slackening. So, among the educated Hungarians and Turks, there is growing up a feeling of racial unity. Though a part of the Austrian Empire, Hungary has repeatedly tried to cut off from her. The result of many revolutions and rebellions has been that Hungary is now only nominally a province of the Austrian Empire, but practically independent in all respects. The Austrian emperor is styled the Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary. Hungary manages all her internal affairs independently of Austria, and in these the subjects have full power. The Austrian emperor continues to be a titular leader here, but even this bit of relation, it appears, will not last long. Skill in war, magnanimity, and other characteristic virtues of the Turkish race are sufficiently present in the Hungarian also. Besides, not being converted to Mohammedanism, they do not consider such heavenly arts as music, etc., as the devil's snare, and consequently, the Hungarians are great adepts in music and are renowned for this all over Europe. Formerly, I had the notion that people of cold climates did not take hot chilies, which was merely a bad habit of warm climate people. But the habit of taking chilies, which we observe to begin with Hungary, and which reached its climax in Romania and Bulgaria, etc., appeared to me to beat even your South Indians.